Mexico City, December 8, 1994. On this day, one of Mexico's most famous and controversial scientists, Dr. Jacobo Greenberg Zilberbaum, left his home and literally vanished into thin air. The mystery was not just in the fact of his disappearance, but in its chilling details. There was no sign of a break-in, struggle, or robbery in his home. His car remained in the garage. His passport, driver's license, and money were left untouched on the table. He disappeared just 4 days before his 48th birthday, at the height of his international fame, when his works were being translated into English. But that was only the beginning of a series of strange events worthy of a spy thriller. Along with Jacobo, his young wife Teresa Mendoza also vanished. A few days after their disappearance, she suddenly reappeared, only to methodically empty all their joint bank accounts, after which she disappeared for good, leaving no clues for investigators. Who was this man whose disappearance was as strange and inexplicable as his scientific theories? Jacobo Greenberg was no ordinary professor. To the scientific community, he was a heretic, a man who dared to turn the lens of rigorous science on what had been considered mysticism and superstition for centuries. He sought to prove that telepathy, healing, clairvoyance, and even magic were not figments of the imagination, but real phenomena that could be measured, understood, and perhaps even reproduced. He was convinced that our brain is not just a biological computer, but something much more. A complex receiver capable of tuning into an invisible information field that permeates the entire universe. Greenberg called this field a space-time grid, or more simply, a reality matrix. And he believed that some people, whom we call shamans or psychics, had intuitively learned to hack this matrix. To understand how revolutionary his ideas were, we need to go back to the very beginning of his journey. From a young age, Greenberg was obsessed with the mysteries of consciousness. After earning his doctorate at the New York Institute for Brain Research, he returned to Mexico with a firm intention to build a bridge between science and what science denied. At the National Autonomous University of Mexico, UNAM, he founded his own laboratory, which soon became a magnet for the most daring minds. It was there that he conducted his most famous and shocking experiments. One of them went down in history as the transferred potential experiment. The experiment was simple in its essence and incredible in its results. Greenberg took two people who had strong emotional ties to each other, lovers, close relatives, best friends. He placed them in separate rooms that were completely isolated from each other, not only by walls, but also by special electromagnetic screens, Faraday cages. No sound, radio waves, or light could pass from one room to the other. He connected electrodes from an electroencephalograph, a device that reads and records the electrical activity of the brain in the form of waves, to the heads of both subjects. Then the experiment began. In one room, the first test subject was shown a series of bright flashes of light or short sound signals. As expected, his brain immediately reacted to this stimulus, and the EEG device recorded a characteristic peak on the tape, a clear and recognizable brain wave. But the most striking thing happened in the other room. At the exact same moment, in the exact same fraction of a second, the brain of the second person, who was sitting in complete darkness and silence and receiving no stimuli, generated an absolutely identical peak. His brain reacted as if he too had seen the flash or heard the sound. Greenberg and his team repeated this experiment hundreds of times, changing the subjects and conditions, but the result remained the same. There was an invisible channel of communication between the brains of two people, unknown to science. Their consciousnesses were somehow synchronized at a distance. This was direct, instrumentally recorded evidence of what we have come to call telepathy. For Greenberg, it was the first key to unlocking the great mystery. He realized that consciousness is not locked inside the skull. It is capable of extending beyond its limits. But these striking experiments were only the first step. They opened a door behind which lay something even stranger and more frightening. Greenberg was not going to just peek behind it. He intended to break it down. And what he found there led him to collaborate with a woman whose abilities defied all known laws of physics and common sense. The results of the transferred potential experiment were a shock to the scientific world, but for Jacobo Greenberg himself, they were merely confirmation of what he already knew intuitively. Our world is much more complex than we are used to thinking. Direct communication between brains at a distance was just one manifestation of a fundamental law of the universe. This law formed the basis of his magnum opus, the theory of synergy. In simple terms, Greenberg's theory sounds like this. Imagine that everything around us, people, planets, stars, the past, present, and future, does not exist on its own, but as information within a giant invisible information network. Greenberg called it a lattice or matrix. This matrix contains absolutely everything, and our brain, in his opinion, is not the creator of thoughts and consciousness, but a complex receiver-decoder, like a television, which does not create programs, but only picks up signals from the air and converts them into images and sound. Most of us are tuned to the same frequency throughout our lives, which we call objective reality. We see the world in the same way because our brain receivers operate in standard mode. But Greenberg was convinced that there are people who are capable of changing the settings of their receivers. Yogis, mystics, mediums, and especially Mexican shamans, or curanderos, were not charlatans to him, but geniuses of neurophysiology. He believed that they had intuitively learned to do incredible things, connect to the matrix and read information from the future, clairvoyance, or even change the broadcast itself by influencing the physical world with the power of consciousness, healing, telekinesis. If his theory was correct, then somewhere there had to be a person who had mastered this art, a master whose abilities would be irrefutable proof of the theory of synergy, and Greenberg found such a person. His search led him to a poor neighborhood in Mexico City, to the home of an elderly, illiterate woman named Barbara Guerrero, known to everyone in the neighborhood as Pachita. Pachita was a legend. Rumors circulated about her that seemed completely absurd. They said she performed complex surgical operations with her bare hands or with a simple kitchen knife. They said she could replace diseased organs with new, healthy ones that she materialized out of thin air. Greenberg, being a scientist, was skeptical, but his curiosity was stronger. He arranged a meeting and went to Pachita's house with his scientific equipment. What he saw next changed his life and his science forever. For 4 years, Jacobo Greenberg was a personal witness and chronicler of Pachita's miracles. He saw everything with his own eyes, recorded it on audio and video, photographed it, and documented each case in detail. In a small, dimly lit room filled with icons and candles, Pachita, falling into a deep trance, truly performed the impossible. Greenberg saw her make incisions in patients' bodies with a rusty kitchen knife, without anesthesia or antiseptics. There was almost no blood, and the patients felt no pain. Then she would reach inside the body, do something there, and sometimes remove the diseased organ and show it to those present. In its place, she could create a new healthy organ. Greenberg, as a doctor and physiologist, held these created organs in his own hands. According to him, they were warm, alive, and perfectly suited to the patient. After that, Pachita would place her hands on the wound, and it would close up before their eyes, leaving only a thin red line that disappeared after a couple of days. For the scientist Greenberg, this was nonsense, a violation of all the laws of biology, chemistry, and physics. But he was there. He saw it dozens of times. Patients who had been given a death sentence by official medicine left Pachita healthy. The shaman herself claimed that it was not she who did all this, but the spirit of the great Aztec leader Cuauhtémoc, who entered her and guided her hands. Greenberg found another explanation for this, one that fit into his theory of synergy. He believed that in a trance state, Pachita's consciousness reached such a level of neurosynergy that she gained direct access to the matrix of reality. She could use the power of her intention to change the information structure of space, forcing matter to obey her will, dematerializing diseased tissue and materializing healthy tissue. He published several books on the Pachita phenomenon, in which he described in detail everything he had seen. The scientific community was furious. Colleagues accused him of charlatanism and betrayal of science. For them, he had crossed the line between reason and superstition. But Greenberg was unshakable. He had proven what he believed. consciousness is primary, matter is secondary. He proved that the human mind is capable of changing the very fabric of reality. But he had no idea that this knowledge, instead of bringing him the Nobel Prize, would put him at the center of a deadly game and lead to an investigation that would be cut short at the most interesting moment. The knowledge that consciousness can alter matter was the crowning achievement of Jacobo Greenberg's scientific career. But in the real world, where money, power, and secrets reign supreme, such a discovery could prove to be a death sentence. The events that followed his disappearance on December 8, 1994, suggest that he really was at the center of a very dangerous game. In the early days, no one raised the alarm. Greenberg was an enthusiastic man who could, without telling anyone, leave for a few days to meditate in the Mexican desert or spontaneously go to a village to talk to the latest shaman. His colleagues and friends were used to his disappearances. But when he failed to show up at his own birthday party on December 12th, it became clear that something serious had happened. His phone was silent, and no one answered the door. His friends called the police. The investigation was assigned to one of Mexico City's best detectives, Commander Clemente Padilla. Padilla was an experienced, pragmatic police officer, a man of facts and evidence. He had investigated murders, kidnappings, and robberies, and he had little interest in theories about the matrix of reality. He approached the case as a standard missing person investigation, but from the very first step, this case was anything but standard. A search of Greenberg's home and laboratory turned up nothing. There were no signs of a break-in, a struggle, or blood. All of his valuables, scientific equipment, books, and personal notes were in place. His passport, driver's license, and money were on the table. His car was in the garage. It looked as if the owner had just stepped out to the store and would be back any minute. Padilla began questioning Greenberg's acquaintances, and a central figure immediately emerged in the case: his young and beautiful wife, Teresa Mendoza. The more the investigator learned about their family life, the darker the picture became. Friends and colleagues unanimously claimed that their marriage had recently been hell. Teresa was incredibly jealous, domineering, and quick-tempered. According to witnesses, she often made a scene in public. Some friends even said that Greenberg had confessed to them that he was afraid of his wife. Padilla began to consider the possibility of a domestic crime, a quarrel that ended in tragedy. This theory became the main one when the key fact came to light. Teresa Mendoza had disappeared along with her husband. But while Jacobo vanished without a trace, Teresa left behind a very suspicious trail. A few days after their disappearance, she used a power of attorney to go to the bank and withdraw all their joint accounts, taking a huge sum of money for those times. After that, her trail went cold. Now Padilla had both a motive, money, and a prime suspect. The plan seemed clear. Teresa had killed her husband, most likely with the help of accomplices, disposed of the body, taken the money, and fled. Commander Padilla threw all his resources into the search for Teresa. Wanted posters were sent out across the country. Dozens of calls came in from people who claimed to have seen her in various cities in Mexico and even in the United States. And then, when Padilla, in his own words, was just one step away from arresting Teresa and her possible accomplices, something inexplicable happened. Agents from the U.S. Embassy came to his office, introducing themselves as FBI agents. They showed a keen interest in the Greenberg case and asked to see all the files. At the same time, Padilla began to notice that witnesses in his case were being followed by unknown individuals. The climax came with a sudden call from the highest echelons of the Mexican government. Padilla was given a direct and non-negotiable order to immediately cease all investigation into the disappearance of Jacobo Greenberg. All case files were seized and classified. For an experienced investigator, this was nonsense. Close an investigation into the possible murder of a world-renowned scientist when the prime suspect had almost been found? It could only mean one thing. The case had reached a level where the regular police were powerless. Someone very powerful, in Mexico or beyond, did not want the mystery of Dr. Greenberg's disappearance to be solved. Officially, The case became a cold case, an unsolved crime. But for Commander Padilla and everyone who knew the story, it was obvious. This was not just a disappearance. It was a carefully planned and flawlessly executed elimination, the traces of which led either to big money and corruption or to the world of international secret services, for whom Greenberg's knowledge could be an invaluable weapon. The order from above that cut short Commander Padilla's investigation was the last official action in the Jacobo Greenberg case. For the authorities and the police, the case was closed and sent to the archives. But for the public, friends, and researchers, the mystery of his disappearance was just beginning to take on a life of its own. When there are no official answers, theories take their place, from the most logical to the completely fantastical. In the nearly 30 years since that December day, three main versions of where the brilliant scientist might have disappeared have emerged. Theory 1, a crime of passion. This is the simplest, most down-to-earth and logical version, which investigator Padilla initially insisted on. According to this theory, there is no mystery or espionage involved in this case. There is only a tragic domestic story. Teresa Mendoza, a quick-tempered and jealous wife, kills her husband during another quarrel. Perhaps someone helped her. Realizing that she faces prison, she stages their joint mysterious disappearance to buy time. She then takes all the money and, with the help of influential relatives or friends, leaves the country for good to live under a new name. There is much to support this theory. Witness testimony about their extremely difficult relationship. The proven fact that Teresa withdrew all the money and her subsequent complete disappearance. It's a classic crime scenario, but there are several serious buts. First, Jacobo Greenberg's body was never found. How could the body of a world-famous man be hidden without a trace in a city of millions like Mexico City? Second, and most importantly, why would the U.S. Special Services and the Mexican government need to intervene so heavily and stop the investigation of a routine domestic murder? This fact does not fit into a simple criminal version and forces us to look for other, more complex explanations. Theory 2. Kidnapping by the Secret Services. This version turns Greenberg's story into a real spy thriller. Proponents of this theory are convinced that Greenberg's scientific work, especially his research into the influence of consciousness on matter, did not go unnoticed across the border. For military and intelligence agencies such as the CIA, his theory of synergy could have been more than just abstract science, but the key to creating revolutionary weapons or previously unseen espionage technologies. Imagine the ability to read minds from a distance, implant ideas, or even remotely influence enemy leaders. If there was even a grain of truth in Greenberg's work, he became the most valuable scientific asset on the planet. According to this version, the American Special Services simply took out Greenberg. He could have been secretly taken to the U.S. and forced to work in a secret laboratory, given unlimited resources but deprived of his freedom. Or they could have eliminated him to prevent his knowledge from falling into the hands of other countries. This theory explains both the FBI agents' interest in the investigation and the sudden order to stop it. The Americans could have pressured the Mexican government to cover up the traces of their operation. Over the years, there have even been rumors from people who claim to have seen a man resembling Greenberg at various universities and research centers in the U.S. However, none of these rumors have ever been confirmed. Theory 3. The Great Experiment. This is the most incredible, most fantastical, and at the same time most beautiful version. It states that Jacobo Greenberg was neither the victim of a murderer nor a pawn in the games of the Secret Services. He was a researcher who successfully completed his main and final experiment. Supporters of this theory say that we need to think like Greenberg. All his life, he proved that consciousness can exist outside the body and change reality. He spent years studying meditation techniques and shamanic practices. What if he finally mastered this art to perfection? According to this version, on December 8, 1994, Jacobo Greenberg did not disappear, but achieved transcendence. A conscious transition from the physical world to the information matrix he had written about all his life. He achieved such control over his consciousness that he was able to separate it from his biological body and continue to exist as a pure stream of information, becoming part of that very universal grid. To the average person, this sounds like madness, but to a scientist who had seen Pachita materialize organs out of thin air with his own eyes, it could have been a perfectly logical and supreme stage in his evolution as a researcher. He did not die. He simply went home. Almost 30 years have passed. Teresa Mendoza has never been found. No new clues have emerged in the case. Jacobo Greenberg is still listed as missing. His books continue to be republished, and his theories inspire a new generation of daring scientists and seekers. He left behind not a mystery, but a great question that everyone must ask themselves. Was he a man destroyed by earthly passion? A genius who became a pawn in a secret war between powers? Or a pioneer who managed to take a step where no human had ever set foot before? Perhaps the answer to the question, "Where is Jacobo Greenberg?" is not to be found on a world map or in classified archives, but in the deepest and most unexplored corners of our own consciousness, where he dared to venture first. That's all. Which theory about Dr. Greenberg's disappearance seems most likely to you? Share your opinion in the comments, like if this story caught your attention, and subscribe so you don't miss other mysterious investigations.